is what they call us. Born pro-war, post-World War II. All this talk about Christian nationalism, you've heard about that? Christian nationalism? Catholics were practicing Christian nationalism in the 50s like no one. I mean, we prayed for the conversion of the Russians and also helped prepare to bomb them to hell with nuclear weapons. How much more nationalistic can you be? Okay. Now, I would like some feedback. If you can give me some.
I got a question. How can you be, or how are you against pro-rich and like you got all these like professional athletes and all these, I don't know, just say you have a lot of money, but they give back to the poor, they help have these foundations, they give back to the homeless and all that. So how can you not be pro-rich, but still give back to people in need?
How can you be rich? I mean, how can you? What was?
So you have a lot of money, but you still give back to the people in need. You give back to the homeless. You give back to.
Oh, how can rich people help poor people? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you're saying you're against like.
I'm against being wealthy, but then on the other hand, if there weren't rich people, a lot of poor people wouldn't be able to be eating right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is how I say it. Basically, in one system, people are slaves. And if there's any charity, it comes from the top. And they're grateful for the charity, but at the end of the day, they're still slaves. And in the other system, people are human. And they treat each other humanly, and there is no slave and master. And there's no billionaires because there are no people who are so poor that they can't feed themselves. Okay, which world do you want to live in? Because as long as we give tax write-offs to the rich to do good, the rich will earn their money from a system that can't help but do bad. Let me give you just an example of how it works in Iowa, where we're supposed to be the breadbasket and feeding people. All of my life, 72 years, Iowa, a farm state. But let me tell you what we've done to our farm state in my lifetime. Half of the soil disappeared down the rivers, causing major climate issues in the Gulf. And the other half of the soil that we have left is dead because of 5, 6, 7 decades of oil-based, high-tech farming that brought in oil-based stuff to pollute the land and took out oil-based energy to come out. And now we have a food base in which we're feeding lots of people, but everybody's enslaved to our beef and our pork and the corn and the soybeans. And it's not sustainable. It's crazy. And we're still building pipelines. Now, folks, when they came back from World War II, there was real farming going on in Iowa. There were small, vibrant little towns. A farm could be 150 to 200 acres and you could make a living off of it. And you had diversity and you had your soil. We could have chose another way after World War II, but no. The fertilizer companies, Farm Bureau, capitalists, bigger, better, bigger, better, bigger, better. So, right, our story in the Bible is Joseph. You know the story of Joseph, The guy, yeah, he's got a rap against his brothers. I get it. Fair enough. They put him in bondage in Egypt. I get it. He's got a beef. And God gives him a gift. And he uses the gift to get himself out of prison with the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh's so impressed with him, hey, I'm going to make you the headmaster. Because you're telling me I'm going to have 7 good years and 7 bad years. Help me out. And so Joseph brings all of his knowledge to the Pharaoh and says, this is what you got to do. You've got to buy all that food when you can. Then when they're starving and can't grow anything, sell it back to them. And at the end of it, they'd be enslaved to you, Pharaoh. That's our story. That's what baby boomer Iowa farmers did. We basically have given up our land to Pharaoh. And now we're all enslaved to the corn and soybean, oil and capital-based farming. Okay, how persuasive is this?
I'd say, I mean, pretty persuasive. The way you're putting it out there, you're like emphasizing on a lot of things. It's like you're drawing in attention, I would say.
Good. I mean, the feedback would be helpful. I'm trying to draw in on things we all are givens. Like we already know the farm thing's a bad thing. Everybody knows the land, air, soil, it's bad. We got to do something about it. We already know the war thing is really off the Richter scale, any serious thing. And you already know that the poor do not get taken well. And let me tell you something, it's not that they're hungry or not hungry. Let's be clear about that. We have as many, if no more, obese people living on the streets than we have obese people in this country. And we are the most obese people in the world. You know that. Because of this crazy food system, and we're just all these things. What we don't have is human space for street people. The best thing we do, I mean, we do feed people. I'm not saying we don't feed people. I'm not saying we don't feed people. But what we do is we create a space that's human. Because everybody who lives on the street comes from a predatory world. Where the moment you get out on the street, you're guarded. We all are there. You come on in my neighborhood, you don't come into my neighborhood very often. You know what I'm talking about. My brothers, my sisters, they all say, you know, that's a tough neighborhood, you know. Aren't you scared of walking around? Because I'm walking around all the time. And I say, you know, after 45 years, you get used to anything. But that's the world we're addressing. And when they come into our house, we tell them to be nice. They only have to be good guests. Because we're a host, and they're welcoming you in our home. It's a whole different scene. People get fed, people's needs are getting met, but mostly people get treated like human beings. You don't get a lot of that in this culture. And that's a big problem. And we do that. We try. Yeah.
What's something that you're proposing that Des Moines needs to do to grow most population downtown?
Well, you know, we need more housing options. We need more, I would say there's folks who are groups to join, like mutual aid. Young people are doing mutual aid stuff. That's really a good group. They work with the homeless. Mostly I would, I'm a proponent of cooperative communal lives off of the general rat race of normality. So that at your age and situation, the real question is not what issue are you gonna fight, because the empire affords you many, many places to fight. And I do mean fight, and we need to. What it doesn't afford you is a place to do it where it's normal. Let me just explain. I do a lot of protesting. At one point, I was going back and forth, trespassing, in congressional places and blah, blah, blah. And the judges got tired of us and they did, they'd give us a fine and then we wouldn't pay a fine because we don't pay fines. I got about a $10,000, $15,000 fine issue at the door. But I don't own a car either because then they won't let you own a car. So I got a friend who owns the car for the Catholic worker that I get to drive. All this is trying to play the game with these folks. And then one time I went in front of a judge who was gonna say, I'm gonna plead guilty. And then the judge says, well, Mr. Cordaro, if you plead guilty, there's gonna be some jail time involved in this. It's like, oh, well, you haven't done this in the last 10 years or 5 years or whatever. So I turn around, I get my car keys and everything to my friend who drove me down there. I'm ready for this, judge. I just want you to know that I thought it was a great honor to get arrested with these high school kids protesting a war in the senator's office. And every day you give me to jail will enhance that honor. And the judge says, well, that's good, 30 days, boom. And I go right out of into the jail 30 days. Who can do that? And 30 days later, come right back out and nobody cares one way or the other. Your house is operating, you got all the support you needed, and you're back in the rat race. See, that's what the Catholic worker afforded me to do. A lifestyle in which I could go to jail and come right back. Now, how many of your parents can afford 30 days off to go do a good deed? Nobody. Well, it seems like Jesus' people seem to be able to make themselves available for that. Seems like if you read the book of Acts, you'd understand that they, in fact, intentionally put themselves into jeopardy. And who was taking care of the hospitality house, the intentional community? Right after Pentecost, get this, right after Pentecost, they start an intentional hippie commune in the middle of Jerusalem. And the number was 3,000. Man, we have a hard time just doing it with 8 or 9 people in 4 houses serving people. But it's a step in the right direction. All right, that's more of my persuasive stuff, having to do with biblical New Testament stuff. What? Best thing I can say about my family, and I have a big family, big Italian-American family, is they didn't kick me out. Yeah, and now I'm so good at it. You've been at it so long. My great uncle, I'm like a cartoon character, well respected. Feeds the poor, pretty harmless. Don't listen to what he has to say. Yeah. Oh, and they all do believe I take Jesus seriously.
Wouldn't you say there's always going to be somebody, though, that, like we were talking about, you're against people being rich or wealthy? Wouldn't you say there's always going to be somebody out there, though, that tries to create that environment of having slaves? So why would you yourself want to be a slave when you can try to make yourself? So I'm just thinking, like, I don't want to be a slave because of the problems that come with that. So I try to, like, I want to be wealthy so I can create a better future for myself. So, like, I don't want to be stuck a slave, if that makes sense. Like, I just feel like there's always going to be somebody out there that tries to create that slave environment, so why not you do? I mean, that sounds kind of messed up, I feel like, but...
Like, get ahead of the game.
Yeah, because
Okay,
nobody wants to be a slave.
Some texts are made for us. This text is made for that question. I believe it's a text made for us who live in America. Listen to this right out of Mark 10, verse 17. It's the rich man. As Jesus was setting out on a journey, a man ran up, knelt down before him, and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus answered him, Why do you call me good? No one's good but God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not be defrauded. Honor your father and your mother. And he replied and said to Jesus, Teacher, all of these things I have observed from my youth. Jesus looked at him, loved him, and said to him, You're lacking in one thing. Go, sell what you have, give it to the poor, and you'll have treasures in heaven. Then, listen to this, then follow me. So, I recommend you give it up and follow him. And following him in this country, I believe, means develop small cooperatives of committed Christians who live below the poverty line and have learned how to do that and serve the poor in service ministry. Now, there's lots of opportunities at this level because so few people are doing it. And having that kind of leaven could put some real mustard behind the love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemy scene. And it's puts you right in the middle of actually serving the bowl of soup, cleaning the toilet, washing the dishes that are assumed in feeding the poor. But when you're just writing a check, you're not doing that. Human space